this is not how to add. We'll get there next. This is about understanding addition. When it comes to more advanced mathematics, we must understand that addition is very restrictive. We cannot just up and add whatever it is we want. Remember units of measure? Now, understand that one of the definitions of adding is gathering together. 3 cows plus 5 cows, well, that's going to give us 8 cows. Well, what about 3 cows plus 5 mice? We cannot add those things. What do we have with 3 cows and 5 mice? Some of you might think, well, we'd have 8 animals. Of course we can add them. No, actually we can't add cows and mice. You just changed the unit of measure to animals before you added. We were dealing with cows and mice, and they are not the same thing. So we can't gather them together. If you change the unit to animals, then we can add them together to get 8 animals, but not until that happens. Let that sink in. It's a detail that cannot be overlooked, and it must be understood. Can we add 3/5 and 1/5? Well, of course, but don't look at it with your eyes, because you might get confused since we're going to be looking at fractions and then your palms might get sweaty. Just hear it with your ears. 3/5 plus 1/5. Remember, if you can read it properly, you can understand it. It sounds like the same unit of measure at play. 3/5 plus 1/5, well, that's just 4 of them. 4/5. Hear it, don't see it. And this works when you teach children how to add hundreds or thousands, and they love bragging about it, right? 100 plus 100 is 200. Absolutely correct. This will carry over into fractions when they get there. Remember, for units of measure, we must always think about conversions. What about 2/5 plus 1/2? And don't look at it yet, just hear it. It's not the same unit of measure, so we cannot add them. Fifths and halves are not the same thing. But can we convert them? Yes, if you know how equivalent fractions work, and we'll get there at a later video. 2/5 is 4/10. And if you don't know, just trust me for now. 1/2 is 5/10. So we can convert them to the same unit of measure, 4/10 plus 5/10. But don't look at it, just hear it. 4/10 and 5/10, that's 9 of them. So 2/5 plus 1/2 is 9/10. But we can only add it together after the conversion. We face this in algebra when we start working with variables. Consider 4x plus 5x. Well, when we look at it, and even if we hear it, it may be confusing. But remember, we can read it a different way. Listen, 4x's plus 5x's. Can you hear the unit of measure in there? If you can, well, that's going to be 9 of them. So 4x plus 5x is 9x. Mastering this will require a lot of practice with variables and knowing about coefficients and all that. But remember, if you can read it properly, you can understand it. Something happens in algebra, though, that becomes a bit weird. Different variables at the same time. Consider 4x plus 5y. 4 x's and 5 y's, not the same unit of measure, so we cannot add them. But can we convert them? Is there a way to convert x's into y's or y's into x's, or both of them into the same thing? No, we can't. And that happens. So what is 4x plus 5y? Well, it's 4x plus 5y. That strange looking thing that we have this desire to compress is already as compressed as possible. Just listen to it to know. There is no way to gather x's and y's as the same thing. And we are forced to be comfortable with leaving it as it is. We see this played out in the real world. Imagine a unit of distance in the real world, let's say 2 feet, and imagine a unit of weight, let's say 1 pound. Is it possible to add 2 feet and 1 pound? Well, that's not the same unit of measure, and it's completely illogical, so no. Why would I even consider adding feet to pounds? You may wonder why I brought that up. I'm going to save that for when we get to multiplication. Just remember, addition is very restrictive. If we have the same unit of measure, we can add. If we don't have the same unit of measure, we must wonder if we can convert the units so they can be the same unit of measure, and then we can add. If we can't convert the units of measure to be the same thing, we can't add, and we'll simply have things that show addition without any way to actually add them. And that happens, and we have to be comfortable with it. In the meantime, remember, be patient and be impressed.